I'll call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. The Committee of the Whole. First up is the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion that that the agenda for the December 14th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted with the addition of closed session item J1, Town of Edson contractual relationship, FOIP section 24(1)(c). Councillor Chenard makes that motion. All in favor? Motion carried. And we'll have the adoption of the previous minutes. Can I get a motion that the minutes of the November 9th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as amended? Councillor Moore makes that motion. Oh, sorry. First, Daniel Lugat would like to speak to it.
Sorry, just for council and members of the public who are viewing, I'll just clarify that there was a quick error in the minutes that were published with the agenda. It indicated that some previous councillors were attending the meeting when in fact it is the current council that was attending that committee meeting. So that's been corrected in the updated agenda.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Motion carried. Moving on, we've got a delegation from the Edson Eagles. I assume they're via Zoom. In fact, I think Mr. Ryder Prue and
hello, that's us right here.
Hello.
So yeah, we got a couple of things that we would like to ask. The first being would be the team dressing room, which is dressing room 7 on the memorial side of the Repsol place. Right now, we're pretty much using it every day from 1:45 to 3:15 for practice. And then on weekends, we'll have a game. I haven't seen any other teams in there. It's pretty much just us as of now.
So basically, we're just asking if you would review your policies that you set last year in regards to who has direct access to the dressing rooms full time. With us being the only junior team in Edson right now, hoping that might be a possibility, at least maybe for the rest of the season.
Okay. Is that everything you have to say?
Well, no, I'd like to say also, we think that it should be in our favor as we're the team who would spend the most. We're around $3,000 to $5,000 in ice fees per month for that would be town revenue, as well as we paid every single bill on time throughout this year. So you pretty much know that we're good with that.
Okay, thank you for bringing this forward. Before we have any questions from council, I will just mention that we won't make a decision on this tonight, and that we would review it with administration, and they would be in contact with you if we are able to make any adjustments. So thank you for that. I will open the floor up to council with any questions. Councillor Schnorr.
Through the chair to administration, if they can answer the question. When there is a hockey game going on, what would be a standard procedure during a game? Would you be assigned a dressing room for that game, or just what would be a standard procedure for that?
So far for the year, we've had that same dressing room all year. It's just that the thing, so to speak to that, the standard procedure would be you are assigned a dressing room, but we have been given that dressing room 7 all year. But the main thing we're asking is just kind of like exclusivity to it. So it's kind of like a storage room. It's the team room, so they don't have to bring their bags home every day. Air them out of the billet house. They can just keep them in there, hang up their stuff. There's some tables in there. There's also a storage room. So then we would have more access for our game day stuff, as our signs, some merchandise and all that kind of stuff. So we wouldn't have to bring it, day in, day out.
Okay, if I could rephrase that, I do appreciate that, but I'm just curious because I don't rent the ice, I don't play hockey. I'm just trying to figure out what would be your standard procedure. If you rent the ice and you have a hockey game, would you be assigned a dressing room?
Yes.
So if I may interject, I think this question is for our administration. So I would turn this over to CAO Beveridge.
Deputy Mayor Byer, through Councillor Chenard, that is typical practice that you'd be assigned a dressing room.
It would be a typical, because I'm just.
As when the scheduling occurs, then
Correct.
The dressing rooms would be assigned.
Okay, that was just a question. I just want clarification. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair to administration here, I guess 2 questions here. What is our policy on our dressing rooms? And the next one is seeing that the other junior team that played here, they were assigned a dressing room for the whole season. And can we not do the same to the Eagles and come up with some kind of agreement that we have 7 rooms? We would never use all 7 at the same time. Is there not a way we can come up with something so that the boys can leave their equipment in the room all the time?
Sue Beveridge?
Deputy Mayor Byer through to Councillor Bevan. Administration can take this back and review. This delegation is to ask questions of the delegation, but if council does have additional questions, we'd be happy to bring something back for council's consideration to make a decision.
Okay, does anybody else have another question for the delegation? Councillor Moore.
Deputy Mayor Byer through to the delegation. So this room, if you got the specific room, would that mean that it would be secure at all times before the game? Because you mentioned that you would be putting some perhaps merchandise in there and such.
Okay, Mr. Prue, do you have a response?
Yeah, that would be the idea, is that it would just kind of be locked by arena staff and then opened up, and for practice or the skate time, and then for games 3 hours before arrival, because that's when the players and myself would start getting into the arena. Or if I get there and I need something, or some of the guys need something they've left in the arena, we would just be able to go ask the reception desk or somebody working there for them to unlock the room.
Thank you.
Okay, if I don't see any more questions for the delegation, thank you for bringing this forward. And as I mentioned, a decision isn't made tonight, but we would just request that administration. Mayor Zahara.
Just before we wrap up, I'm just wondering, do you have any other requests or any other information you want to share before we move on to our next agenda item?
Yeah, I got one more thing. So as of now, we're paying 2 months in advance for ice. I was just curious if we could get it down to 1 month in advance.
We will take that back and have administration look at that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So thank you again. If you'd like to stay for the meeting, you're welcome to, but if not, you can always clock out as well. So we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda is reports from staff. We've got the 2022 strategic planning overview, which I believe is by CEO Beveridge.
Good evening. So this evening I do have Ian McCormick with us on Zoom, as well as Ben Poole. They are with strategic steps, and as we enter into the process of our strategic planning session, we felt it was prudent to bring forward Ian and Ben to speak on how the process will be conducted this year, and allow council just to have an introduction with Ian, as well as ask any questions that you may have with regards to the process. So I will hand it over to Ian.
Thank you, CEO Beveridge and Madam Chair. It's good to be able to meet with you this evening. We were actually planning on being with you this evening. However, road conditions being what they were and putting safety first, we chose to join you virtually, unfortunately. Certainly would have enjoyed being with you this evening. At very least, of course, we will join you in February as we get a chance to work with you as you develop your new strategic plan for the town too. Your CAO introduced Ben Prue, who works with strategic steps as well as I do. And so Ben will just be monitoring this evening. He may comment from time to time as well. Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I've got a presentation I would like to run through for a few minutes anyway, and let's see where we get to. At that point, I'm more than happy to have some discussion with you. I understand the role of committee of the whole, of course, versus a council meeting. So if there are things that you would like some extra clarification on, questions that you have in general, Madam Chair, I'm more than happy to respond to that too, if that's all right with you. So with that in mind, it's my intention then just to share my screen, and hopefully we will see where we get to from here. I would just like to confirm that you can actually see this, if somebody could just let me know.
Yes, Ian.
Okay, thanks very much. So just what we're going to, a little bit of an overview of what I would like to speak to you just generally about is just to introduce ourselves a little bit more fulsomely. Talk us a tiny bit about role clarity. I know you have recently gone through your election, of course, and then your orientation. So I'll breeze through that. I've left it in here just in case anybody had questions in it. Then we'll speak to who owns different plans within the municipal structure, and then specifically to the role of strategic planning. And I tend to title this "If You Don't Know Where You're Going." And it's that reference to the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, where the Cheshire cat told Alice that if she doesn't know where she's going, any road would get her there. And of course, the idea behind strategic planning is exactly the opposite. Now, you have a strategic plan that expires in 2021. So you're on that road, and we're going to talk a little bit about where we go from here. I think from speaking to your CAO previously, some of you will have seen the book that I wrote in 2020 called Who's Driving the Grader. It's primarily about role clarity for local government. And if I'd be interested, if any of you have comments about that, I'm more than happy to speak to you about that as well. We operate as a company in the space between elected officials and appointed officials. So we tend to work in the election cycle mostly in Western Canada. So with Saskatchewan's municipal elections last year, and then next year with BC and Manitoba having their municipal elections, and of course ours was a couple of months ago, we do things like orientations, which we've just come off a batch of those. We'll get into a lot of strategic planning coming up in the first quarter of 2022. And then as things pop up, we do governance and organizational reviews. We do code of conduct reviews as well, and other things that are associated with legislative roles like bylaw and policy creation reviews, that sort of thing too. I've written this book called Who's Driving the Grader. My next book is called The DNA of Great Leaders, and it's about the 25 aptitudes of the best functioning mayors. I've worked with hundreds of councils and therefore hundreds of mayors in Canada, in the United States, and in Australia. So I had to put that book together. It's currently in the final editing stages with Municipal World. I also write a column for the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association called Governance Voice. So that's just a bit about me. As we get into strategic planning and you think about what it is that you as a council and you as individual members of council want to contribute to your community, to me anyway, the fundamental question is, how is Edson different in October of 2025 than it is or was in October of 2021? So in reality, what's the legacy that this council leaves? And anytime you bring the group of people together, they are a team, they are unique, it will never be exactly the same again. So the impact that you have on your community is always different as well. And that's expressed then through your strategic plan. I'm going to skip over some of this just to get to the pieces around strategic planning. I provided a copy of all of this to your administration, and if you've got it, that's fantastic. If you would like a copy, they are probably more than able to pass this on to you as well. So this speaks a little bit about your role as individual members of council. If any of you have read my book, you may have come across this concept of the 4 buckets of the things the council gets to deal with. Now, first of all, with your single employee in the CAO, you are responsible for holding that person accountable, of course, for retaining a CAO, for evaluating a CAO, and then replacing as necessary too. And your action occurs through 3 levers. You can either change bylaws, you can change policies, or you can change budgets. And that's where you hand off to the rest of your municipal structure. When you moved into office, you inherited work from the previous council. So that's the first bucket of stuff, if you like, very eloquent word. The first bucket of stuff that you get to deal with. The second bucket you get to deal with are things that are handed down to you from other orders of government. Now, in the last term, council got to deal with big things like cannabis legalization or with changes to the Municipal Government Act. This council, of course, is still dealing with things like COVID, which falls into that third bucket as well. So the 3 first things you get to deal with are whatever's left over from your previous council, whatever gets handed to you from another order of government, and the things you don't want to deal with but have to. Oftentimes it's natural disasters, but certainly the last term we've seen COVID be a big part of that. And finally, why this becomes relevant is the change that you want to make in your community. I have yet to run across a council that says, I want things to be exactly the same at the end of the term as they were at the beginning. My suspicion is that you ran for a reason to make Edson, in your perception at least, better for business, for families, for organizations, for tourists, all those sorts of things. So this is the material that you want to deal with. Probably things that may have been on your platform, things that may be carrying forward from the current strategic plan, and whatever else that the group may decide to come up with. So this fourth bucket is what you really want to do. Also, knowing that you've recently gone through your orientation, I'm just going to skip over the note of the council's role, with the exception of saying that your job, of course, and your oath when you said it, was to look after the interests of the entire municipality, not just you and your neighbors or your block or a particular community group or something like that. So as you look over the entire 4 years of your term, how do you benefit the municipality as a whole? You as a council, and you've probably gone through this too, are responsible for talking about what needs to be done. And you do that through a series of tools like your strategic plan, like a vision, like a mission, and a series of values that you may create as well. And then policy development. And the policy that you develop is governance policy rather than administrative policy, or sometimes called directives. And your administration will have those. So primarily you set vision about what success looks like for you as a community, how you get there, which is through the mission of the community, and then through the policy that you create too. And then there's a bit of a handoff. And you hand off from your decision about what to do to administration to figure out how best to do it. So through your CAO, of course, then she in return hires a series of experts who, and they in turn hire experts as well about, excuse me, how to best manage the municipality to deliver the things that need to be delivered kind of behind the scenes. Insurance keeps getting paid, streets keep getting plowed, fire hydrants get flushed. That may not be in the strategic plan, but still needs to be done. And so they are primarily responsible for delivering programs and services, for building and maintaining facilities and amenities. Now, it's not a direct black and white here, of course. Administration will help you as you develop vision and mission in your strategic plan, because they've got a lot of that expertise. And where they don't, they bring in people such as Ben and myself. At the flip side, you are the face of your community. So even though you are not involved in service delivery directly, you probably are. You're probably out there flipping hot dogs or pancakes from time to time. You might be on a parade float. You're the people who hear comments from your co-citizens as well. So that you do have a little bit of service delivery to do too. So how this gets reflected in terms of the plans for the town, vision and mission are yours as councils to express your unique identity. You express that through the strategic plan, through a series of goals, which are changes that occur over time, and strategies or actions, which are things that actually get done in order to achieve some of those changes over the course of your term and beyond. At that point, the handoff from the what to the how happens for administration. And your CAO and others within administration have probably got a whole bunch of other plans behind the scenes that aren't councils, but help carry out council's plan. You may know that these exist, a business plan or an operational plan or a corporate plan, but they're not yours as members of council. You likely have, if not complete, then underway, things like an asset management plan and a series of other things too. Ultimately to the service delivery, we heard that with the last delegation too, about the importance of municipal facilities to the organizations within the town. And then finally, a feedback loop gets built into reporting as well. Reporting at the end of a quarter, financially perhaps, reporting at the end of a year on how the strategic plan is going, or fundamentally the reporting at the end of a 4-year term, where if you choose to run in the election again, to find out how well it's gone over those 4 years. So if we think specifically about strategic planning, we're thinking about the road that you choose. And that road, you will create your own future this way. But one of the things you want to be sure of is that you can't bind a future council. But you also want to leave future councils and future citizens the ability to make choices for themselves as well. We term this the phrase sustainability, in that you are an ongoing entity that can self-replicate for the next term and the next term and the next term. This isn't a new concept, as you can see from this quote here from a United Nations report from 1987. It talks about being prudent stewards of the resources that you've got. Now, resources are limited. If they weren't, you could be everything to everybody, but you can't. So resources are time and money, the staff that you've got, the political capital that you're either creating or losing, and then just time as well. So other things too. If you think specifically about where we're going in this cascade from top to bottom, if you create the vision for your community, which where we're going over the next, I typically say a generation, and a generation is far enough out, council, that you can probably not be on council anymore, but you may still be in the community. We talk about mission, which I've already mentioned is how you get there. And then you create a series of values, which are filters or lenses through which you will make decisions. So if you take your vision and your mission and your values together as a corporation or as a town, if you want to look more broadly than that, that gives you a unique identity. It's what makes Edson different from Hinton, different from Entwistle or Mayerthorpe. And then from within that, to put that into action, that's where the plan comes in, and that's what we'll help you with. You're looking at those goals, not very many, pretty high level, and looking at change. So because you're looking at change, that's what we call outcomes in terms of results. The strategies, however, are things that you will do to support your plan, the tactical things that, that we can measure how much, how many, how often. And then we'll build in some performance measures as well. How are we going to know if and when we are successful? So all of that together, that what I call cascading alignment, from vision right the way to performance measures, is what council will eventually see in its draft strategic plan. We're actually right at this stage at the moment with a couple of other plans, one for the city of Prince George and another one for the city of Prince Albert in BC and Saskatchewan, respectively. So we've been working on this around the West. You have a strategic plan, as I mentioned. This plan from 17 to 21 was likely created by the last council, owned by the last council. The new plan is going to be created by you, and my hope is that you as a council will own this as well. And this will help fundamentally express what it is that makes Edson unique, different from anywhere else. What is the reason that people would move to Edson and to bring their families? And why would they stay? These are the things that we would think about in terms of the strategic plan. I've spoken a little bit about this already, but your plan will start at the top with your vision of success. We'll talk about how you get there, what do we want to do to achieve the success, and then the rules that we have for working together. You may say that some of your values are things like accountability or transparency. More and more municipalities have been saying fun is one of their values. We just finished an exercise much like this with the municipality of Jasper, for example. You have a series of pillars in your current strategic plan from 2017. And this is where the handoff happens. So these 5 items on the right here become the handoff to administration, and therefore become something you can hold administration accountable. Well, ultimately, you're accountable for the plan, but what interests council should fascinate administration. So what you set out in terms of strategy and how you change your municipality over the next 4 years with an eye towards that future generation from now, this is the stuff that you're working on. Behind this, of course, is performance measures, so we know if we're heading in the right direction or not. And we can celebrate some of that success if we're moving things. And where work isn't happening or where outcomes aren't being met, we can have a little bit of a look about why, with the idea being that we should maybe make some changes looking ahead. You eventually will develop a big bucket of stuff to do, goals and strategies. But you can't be everything to everybody all at once right now. So we narrow that focus down substantially to say, of all the stuff you want to see done over the next 4 years during your council term, what's important and timely for 2022 or for 2023 or beyond? And then we narrow the focus to those high priority items, things that are both important and timely. So council and maybe administration can help with this as well. can work together to narrow from a list of 15 or 20 things, maybe to the top 3, 4, 5 that we can actually look at from time to time. Just a few questions here, and I'll just zip through this very quickly. But as we look to the vision for the community expressed by you as council, what does success look like for you? I didn't find a specific vision statement for Edson. It might well exist. I just didn't find it in my look through here. But these are some of the questions that we would consider. Likewise, if we went for mission, how we get from here to there, I didn't find a mission statement, but I mean, it could well be there, I just didn't find it. But these are some of the questions that we would pose to you as council and other participants in the strategy workshop. But why are you here? How are we going to get from here to where we want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up, if you like? And then we talked about values too, guiding principles, if you like, making sure that they help you achieve your vision and your mission. I used the potential vision statement or value of transparency earlier. If a decision comes to you as council and it runs against that value, or if it doesn't help you achieve your vision or your mission, is it really a decision you ought to be making? So I will challenge council with that just a little bit, but chances are you have a pretty good understanding of what it is that the mood of your community right now and into the future as well. So we'll look at those pieces. As I come to you in early February, when we start working on this, we'll start talking a little bit about timelines too. How long are we looking? I have generally seen in the last few years, councils in Alberta and around Western Canada for that matter, move to 4-year plans. They used to be 3, but to align with the changes, the 2-term ago change in the election cycle, they're more and more commonly 4-year plans now, looking out with a vision 20, 25 years into the future, or that generation. And then from that, your administration can build its own plans, maybe a 1-year or a 2-year operational plan, corporate plan, business plan, with an outlook from there 2 or 3 years ahead. And then if we're looking at priorities, if council is interested in keeping track of your high priority items, maybe you review them 2 or 3 times a year and then do a complete reset a year from now. The environment will have shifted. Other things will have shown up on your plate. Work will have been done, freeing up some capacity, and you can concentrate on what's important and timely for the following year at that point. And you get a really good sense through that about how well the plan is actually being implemented, how well it's resonating with the people who live there. And then, of course, we will assign budgets to that too. As we look at strategic plans, we would propose that we look across the municipal corporation, not up and down. So rather than looking at recreation or looking at public works or emergency services, just straight up and down, we'll look across at a sustainable organization, all of whom has a function that's associated with governance, all of which has some culture behind it and the social aspect of interaction within your community. Of course, there's the economy to think about too, whether that's the economy that kind of happens to you because of changes in commodity markets and things like that, or whether it's what you make it, whether it's looking for shop local programs, or if we're looking for micro and small businesses. And finally, we look at the environment. And the environment in this case is anything that happens on or under the land. So you'll see things like infrastructure here, as well as you would see things like an urban tree program, if you've got something like that. Others will have urban agriculture. Zoning and planning fall into here too. I'm going to leave these slides just for the sake of time and say, I've given you some examples here of what might show up in some of these, what we call sustainability pillars. These might not be the 4 or 5 areas that end up in your strategic plan, but it's a good way to start thinking across the organization rather than up and down. In terms of where we get to next, we think about how we narrow our focus. How does what you want to do over the next year or 4 years or generation move you towards whatever success is as determined by your vision? How does it help you get towards achieving the goals that you've set in terms of the strategies or the to-do items? And how does it give maybe the next council the ability to start from your shoulders rather than starting from the ground? And I tend not to think of priorities listed 1 to 20, for example, because public works can be working on something at the same time your municipal administrative structure could be working on something too. So they could both conceivably have something that's a high priority item. And then finally, looking at priority, I think I mentioned this just a little bit ago too, about setting up a cycle for review. One of the dangers of strategic planning is that council goes into it with really good intentions, generates a very good plan, and then doesn't look at it again. I really like seeing strategic plans that are dog-eared and sitting on the corner of the CIO's desk or on council. But one of the ways to keep this thing moving is to keep looking at it. So looking, say, at a quarterly review of the targets, maybe just the high priorities. I've already suggested linking budgets to priorities as well. I mean, there are programs like priority-based budgeting, of course, which work hand in glove with things like strategic planning. And then very importantly, to celebrate success. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about cakes and balloons, although you're absolutely welcome to do that if you want. What I'm talking more about here is how do the people who work for the town and how do the people who live in Edson know that things are happening? And it might be a state of the town address. It might be a speech to the Rotary Club. It might be a newsletter or a handout that happens. It might be something that happens on Canada Day or on New Year's, or some combination of those sorts of things. But I think it's really important to celebrate success. I just want to get you thinking too about after the fact in terms of engagement. Some municipalities we work with ask for work in advance of strategic planning so we get a mood of a municipality. Now, you've just gone through the biggest engagement exercise of every 4 years, so I suspect you've got a really good handle on the mood of Edson at the moment. But as you think into subsequent years, into years 2, 3, and 4 of your term, where do you go and how do you encourage public participation? Now, you will have a policy, a public participation policy, because that was one of the changes that was required during the last term. You can think about that. This diagram is created by the International Association of Public Participation, or IAP2. And it really just shows that not all engagement is equal. And at some point, you are just asked to tell people what's going on. Maybe it's just what's on your website. At the far end, you're actually empowering people in your community to make decisions. Now, you as council are the final decision-making body, so you don't go quite that far, but you might consult with them, you might involve them, or collaborate with them too. You can also look at engagement after the fact. We're actually doing that with Okotoks at the moment with their strategic plan, is they have asked for a public engagement exercise to help choose the priorities. Council will create the plan, but then it wants to ask the community, did we get the right goals? And help us choose the priorities for this next year, what's important and what's timely. So there are a whole series of activities that you as council could undergo if you want to engage either in advance or afterwards, broadly or narrowly in scope. We can certainly help provide some counsel with that as well. In terms of the advocacy activities, you don't want to be hiding your good work under a bushel, your candle under a bushel. So once the strategic plan is there, how are you going to make it public, make it live, make yourselves held accountable for it if you like? And so there are some sort of advocacy activities here or engagement activities you could consider too. And we, of course, will work within the bounds of your policy. Just as that was kind of the wrap up for what we wanted to do, Madam Chair. And I on these pages, I left my contact information too, and I know your CAO has it. And I'm more than happy to speak with you after the fact too, either directly or through your CAO to provide a bit more information about this. We're really looking forward to having an opportunity to come and work with you. I really enjoy doing strategic planning because it's all about possibilities. And when it's done at the beginning of a term, like it is now, you have a canvas of 3.5, 4 years ahead of you that I think is really quite fantastic. So with that, Madam Chair, and wanting to respect the time that you're spending here this evening, I'm quite happy to turn it back to you and your colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCormick, for your presentation. I'll see if council has any questions. Councillor Chenard.
Hi, through the chair. My question is, with the amount of experience in this room, what would we gain by having you come in and help us plan our strategic planning?
That's a very good question. So Madam Chair, when we come in to do anything actually with any municipal council, we're brought in either for reasons of capacity or independence or expertise, and usually some combination of those. We have done literally I don't know, dozens of strategic plans in 4 or 5 different jurisdictions, state, provinces and territories. We've done them for municipalities. I made a reference to places like Prince Albert and Prince George, all the way down to towns and villages. So we've seen a really good cross-section of what works and what doesn't. The other thing we bring is the ability to move what may be tactical or to-do lists up to the strategic. So for example, if you had a campaign brochure, chances are your brochure didn't necessarily talk about, we want to have infrastructure that meets the needs of a growing community over time, which might be a goal. It probably said we need to fix potholes or something to that effect. So we have the ability to synthesize what you provide in terms of, and the to-do list may also have come from what you heard from residents too during the campaign. So we have the ability to synthesize that and move it up into the realm of strategy. We bring a process that we have used many, many times that is quite interactive as well. And having an external facilitator in this versus doing it internally, I think is always a good idea, because it gives the ability for all members of council and the members of administration who are part of it as well to contribute as colleagues, not necessarily as members of council and members of administration, but people who are all interested in the best interests of Edson. So Councillor, we bring a lot of experience mostly to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I've got a question. I'm not sure if it's directed then towards you, Mr. McCormick, or if CEO Beveridge would be better to answer it. So previously at our other strategic planning sessions that we've held, council has generally prepared a list of items to our CAO on things that we would like to accomplish. Is that process still the same way that we would give that to our CAO, or is this something that we would be providing directly to you?
Madam Chair, I'll take that and certainly defer to your CAO if you'd like. We do 2 things in advance, 3 things actually in advance. The first is we do a pre-session survey, an online survey for everybody who's participating. And it asks questions like, what did you hear on the campaign trail? The things that you want to see on there. It asks for a review of how you think things have been accomplished in the current strategic plan. It asks for things like, what do citizens think are the most appreciated facilities, services, programs, amenities? What do you think the least appreciated are? It asks some general questions like, are there things that you want to bring up in the strategic plan that we haven't dealt with? And I also ask, we started asking a question too during the last year and a half about COVID. And that is there anything that's come out of COVID that you think we might want to keep? And I don't want to presuppose any responses to that, so I won't tell you what we typically hear. The second thing we do in advance is we would generally ask senior managers for an indication of what's hot for them, what's their high priorities right now, and what's on their plate for the next little while. And then a couple of more general questions about how can council help get the work done? And are there barriers that council can help remove as well? The third thing we would do, we tend to do a one-on-one briefing with the mayor and get his perspective on how things are going to roll. We would run through the agenda with him. We would also provide just some notes about how he might help us to kick off the workshops, because fundamentally we are there as enablers. This needs to be your plan, not ours. So it needs to start with the mayor and members of council and be supported by members of administration. Madam Chair, I don't know if that answers your question. You asked a short question. I gave you a fairly long answer. I'm not sure if there's anything else you need on that.
No, that was good. Thank you. Mayor Zahara.
Yeah, through to Ian, you mentioned priority-based budgeting. Are you seeing municipalities tying that into their strategic plan more and more as you're working with communities? Is that a more popular way of dealing with the financial realities that municipalities are facing?
Madam Chair, to the mayor, yes. I'm not sure if it's capital like the proprietary priority-based budgeting (PDB), or if it is just putting the money to what's important. I mean, fundamentally, when you as council pass a budget, you put money to the things you think are important. So it is a priority-based budget in that way. However, if you look at it in a more conscious sense, priority-based budgeting as a formal process. It starts with an analysis of all the programs and services that you offer. And then that analysis gets fed eventually through to the budgeting process, through the lens of a strategic plan, particularly through vision. How does this program or this service help us become whatever it is we want to become the generation from now? So we actually work in a process we call great governance with intent. And we work with a couple of collegial companies on this. And it's a 3-piece process. One is strategic planning, and it kind of leads the process. The second is around priority-based budgeting in a formal sense. And the third is looking at community well-being. So as I mentioned, there are reasons that people move to Edson and there are reasons that they stay there. And that then becomes the important piece. The 3 pieces together will roll in an annual cycle to make sure you're putting your money to the places that they have the biggest impact now and into the future to create greater levels of well-being within Edson. The short answer to the question is yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore.
Through the chair to Mr. McCormick, over the years, you've dealt with strategic plans. Have you ever come across something that's radically different or which strays from the norm?
They're all a little bit different, Madam Chair. One of the reasons we started looking at governance, environment, culture, social, and economy, rather than looking at lines of business, was that we were looking for some of those innovative pieces. And that's one of the reasons we like getting people together, physically together, and having administration and elected officials work together as a team. Some of the pieces that have happened, we did one a few years ago for the Edmonton Police Commission. And one of their requests was it can't be more than 1,500 words. And it may sound sort of flippant, but what they really were after was the distillation of all the stuff we want to do down to the very most important pieces. Others we have seen have had areas of concentration that seem to be based on current activity. For example, COVID recovery at the moment is showing up quite a lot. Over the last few years too, we've seen more and more concentration on asset management as things like infrastructure deficits become greater and greater. Where we see perhaps some of the most innovation is in those communities which are very heavily weighted on the residential, non-residential tax and assessment realm, particularly when they're weighted very strongly towards residential, which, as you likely know, residential taxes, if they're reasonable, don't pay for residential services. You require commercial and industrial investment to be able to do that. So that one of the next sessions we've got that we've kind of started already on the pre-session work is with the city of St. Albert. And that's one of the pieces that they're facing at the moment with how do we be innovative? And is council willing to accept some prudent risk in order to bring that innovation out? What happens in in Edson, for example, if you try something new and it doesn't work? What are the ramifications for that? Is it well, we learned from it, we won't do it again? Or is it, we really shouldn't have tried, or we really shouldn't have risked very hard? So those are the sorts of pieces, Councillor, that we see more generally than specifically in terms of slightly different approaches to things. Everyone's just a little bit different anyway.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair, so we have our 2-day session planned in February. We have the session, assuming things go well, and then the strategic plan will be brought back to us at a council meeting to officially approve, I assume.
Yes.
What's the timeline within that process to have the strategic planning session to official approval of the strategic plan?
So I can't say official approval because I don't want to presuppose the council's decision making. What we do after the session is we will work with your administration primarily to get it to a place where it is suitable for presentation to council as a draft. So that's usually, well, we've got a whole lot of them coming up. So I suspect probably in the range of a month, give or take. And if council chooses to receive it and approve it at the very first time they see it, absolutely, that's within council's prerogative. If council wants to see it as a draft and make comment and change it, obviously that extends it by whatever time that happens to take.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No. Okay. Is that everything that you require from us, CO Beveridge? And Mr. McCormick? Okay, all right, thank you very much. If you'd like to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're certainly welcome to. And if not, you can always leave the meeting as well. So
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and the rest of council.
thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next report from staff. We've got Community and Protective Services, a review of the cemetery bylaw 1897 and cemetery fees, presented by Bob Beck, our GM of Community and Protective Services, and Gav Latour, our Parks and Facilities Maintenance Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Guy to lead us through the presentation.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. And the report is in front of you, and I'm just going to give a very short presentation and then open it up for discussion for everybody. So let me first share my screen. Is everybody able to see that right now?
Yes.
Okay, let me just go to slideshow. There we go. So background on the bylaw, currently the cemetery bylaw that we have is dated May 2000. So we've been working very hard over the last year on updating that bylaw, doing the research, checking all the other communities' bylaws and everything. And we anticipate very quickly being able to bring that full bylaw for your review in the next couple weeks or month. Some of the changes that we anticipate that we'll be bringing forward include expanded and updated definitions, addition of disinterment guidelines, which we will be recommending that we do not perform disinterments and that it would be a third party that would do that. Modernization of multiple sections of the bylaw in updating details with expanded monument and marker guidelines, clarification and update of general regulations, and addition of no internments under monuments or grave covers due to the extreme difficulty of performing that task. We've also done a very comprehensive review of the fees for cemeteries. Cemetery operations currently are at about 20% cost recovery for our operations. The fees have also not been updated in several years. We did a full regional review of all their similar sized communities in our region. And that full document is in your package, but I'll just highlight a few things here. You can see in the chart here, everything across the top is our fees. Everything in purple is the lowest fee. Everything in red is the highest fee. Typically, we have the lowest fees out there currently, and we are way even below the average on most of our fees. The only fee that we really are in alignment is our columbarium purchase for a niche, but everything else is substantially below the region. Another thing we wanted to identify and discuss is the cost recovery on what our current columbariums are at this point. We have used the same style of columbarium for many years now. It's a 32 niche columbarium. It costs us $32,000 roughly. The plaques that we put on them roughly cost us $500. So that's another $16,000. Staff time to prepare and do everything. And so at the end of the day, a single niche currently costs the town about $1,700. and we charge $1,000 fee for that niche. So every niche currently is we're losing $717 on every niche that we sell. So we incur those extra costs. When we talk about fees, one of the things that we're recommending that we think is really important is the plaques that we put on them cost us just under $500, but when you have shipping, staff time and everything, that plaque that you put on the front of the niche costs us about $500, and we don't charge for that. So if we did include a fee of $500, our current columbarium niches, we would still be losing about $217 on each niche. We are suggesting the possibility to look at changing our columbariums to a larger columbarium, which is 72 niches. It's a vertical columbarium that we included the pictures with this package of our current vertical one, or our horizontal one, sorry, and then the vertical one. Even if we were to go to that new niche, it's more cost efficient, but without charging for that plaque again, you're still at a loss of $380. We don't get to cost recovery until we start, if we choose to charge for those plaques that we put on it. We believe at this point that the plaque is no different than you would have a headstone. So when somebody buys a cemetery plot, they bought the plot, but they're still responsible for paying and putting up their own headstones. We think it's the same philosophy that would apply to the cemetery niche. You buy the niche, but if you want a plaque on the front of it, you would have to cover the cost for that. So what we are recommending is increasing fees to the regional average over a 3-year period, charging a fee of $500 for the columbarium niche plaques. And as I just explained, we think that's in alignment with the same philosophy you would have with a burial and them paying for the headstone. We're also recommending adding charges for the additional services that we provide currently that we do not charge a fee for, but other municipalities and other cemeteries do that. So that's just a very brief overview. There's additional information in the package, and I'm open for discussion and questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Latour, for the presentation. Questions from council? Councillor Chenard?
Through the chair to Guy. The only one I have a question on where we have recommendations number 3, the charging of opening and closing after hours. I just want clarification on that, because what do we consider after hours? And when people are planning funerals, they don't necessarily get to choose the dates. So primarily could be Saturday, Sunday. So I would like to keep that the same. And if we are at 75 and it's too low, then maybe make it, if we got to go to 200, but keep it even, because we don't want somebody getting stuck on the issue like, oh my God, I got to have the funeral during regular business hours, Monday to Friday, and not Saturday, Sunday. So I don't mind us getting cost recovery, but I don't like the thing after hours charge.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Chouinard. The philosophy has always been cost recovery. And when we often don't get a lot of notice when the funerals come, and it's difficult sometimes to change the shifts with staff. So we often incur staff overtime, and our collective agreement is on Sundays we pay, I believe, double time regardless. So we have a very large cost that we incur with the staff when it's outside of working hours, if we don't get enough notice to pre-plan our staff.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair to Guy and Bob. I like the idea that we could look at going to the 72 for the vertical columbarium. it looks that we won't have the repairs like we'd have on a flat one, which would save us money in the long term. So I like that. I think it's only fair that we charge for the packs too. If we can break even on it, that's good. I think we don't want to lose money every year on it because we have to keep putting more money back in the budget. It just grows on us and we have to find it and put in there. So we can at least break even on it. I'm happy with that. The other question I have is on the, here it says your expanded monuments and marker graves. The question I have is that on a grave site, when you can put 6 urns in one site, I think our bylaw is right now, you only get to put 2 plaques on them, or 3 at the very most. Will that be looked at so that if a family buys a plot to put 6 of their relatives in there, or family, whatever, they each could put a plaque to up to 6 on that site right now? And the reason I asked that is because I ran into that problem where I was told I could only put 3 plaques on there, I couldn't put 6 on there. Is that something we're gonna look at for, and I know other families have run into the same problem. We were told that you could only put 3 in there. You may have 4 or 5 urns in there right now, but you could only put 3. Is that gonna change?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Bevan. Before I answer, just quick clarification. You're talking about burial plots and cremations in a burial plot and headstones, not plaques on a columbarium niche, correct?
No, I'm not talking about the columbarium niche. I'm not, I'm talking about the plots.
Yeah.
I know in the cemetery, we would like to get away from our headstones and go with the plaque, so it's better for our parks to be able to keep the place clean and mow and everything else, and they don't start running into everything and that, and then busting our headstones up right now and that.
So through the chair to Councillor Bevan, we the new expanded definitions and criteria for cremation in burials is basically comes down to the physical space that you can do it at the head of the grave, where we will give as much leeway as we can at the head of the grave, but we do not want things going into the burial area, because then it's extremely difficult to maintain, as you indicated, mow around, damage those items. So the purpose and intention is to keep everything at the head of the grave in the space that we can give them.
So if I may.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that at the head of the grave, so every time somebody would say pass away and you bury them in that plot, cremation, they're gonna have to pick up that plaque and put another plaque down, which is another cost to them. So if you can put 6 of them in that one plot, they're gonna have to pay 6 times to have that plaque changed at their expense, which could be, say, $500 each time or $600 each time. So now you're 6 times 500, you're looking at a fair amount of money there.
So
And that plaque is changed every time then.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Bevan. I will have to follow up and check on that, but at the end of the day, the owner of the plot is responsible for their headstone or their monument, and we do not cover the cost. We're just putting the criteria they have for how much space they have and what kind of monument they can put there. For there is criteria that it can't be anything, right? But I will follow up definitely and check into that and get a better answer for you.
Okay, I'll leave it as now, and maybe I could talk to you and Bob at a later date, and maybe we can I can explain it a little better in person of what we went through, and I know other families have gone through and what they have brought to me for sure. So I know it needs some work. It's really outdated for sure. So I'm glad we're working on it.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Zahara.
Thank you for your work on this. Obviously, we are way behind the pack when it comes to cost recovery. I do like a 3-year plan, so we're not hitting everybody at once. I do think we need to, at the very least, be at the average of the region. I also believe that a 72 columbarium would be a better investment for the community moving forward, and I like the changes that you have proposed here. And I do believe that if we have costs associated with calling out staff after hours or outside of their normal schedules, that we recover that cost. That should not be borne on taxpayers as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair to administration, I like that we're doing this as well. A little disappointed that it has perhaps taken this long to get here. I wish that perhaps this was updated at a much more timely fashion or updated much more frequently. But with that being said, looking at the cost recovery, we're looking at a 20% cost recovery currently. After 3 years, what would our cost recovery look like?
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor. Depending after 3 years, if we bring our fees up to the regional average, we don't have any substantial changes, we potentially could get up to 30% cost recovery. But there's a lot of factors that are dependent on that, but we could get close to 30, I think, at some point.
Thank you. I've got a question to administration. So on the, I'm just going to go back here. So we have written in here, or you have written in here that the cost for the 72, 72 niches. Do we require another columbarium right now? Are we running out of space? Is that a part of it, or do we still have some room left in the current location?
Through the chair, or through the count, or through the chair, or through the chair to the chair. Sorry, my apologies. Tongue-tied. We are currently this year selling niches at double the rate that we did in the previous year. We are monitoring it very closely. The intention, we have a new columbarium in the 2023 budget, but based on monitoring sales, it could become a reality that we would need to get a columbarium earlier. But we are currently monitoring it, but the sales have been double what they were the previous year.
Okay, thank you. And another question. So I'm trying to understand why we would increase the fees over a 3-year period. I understand with things like the landfill, there's user groups that have to make budgets on large purchases for the landfills, and things like that as an example. I don't understand why 3 years is in the same situation for a cemetery as maybe another service that we provide, unless people buy them that far in advance. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I understand that method.
Yeah, through the chair. If you look at the document I gave with the fees on the very bottom, there's a percentage of what we'd have to increase each fee to meet the regional average. So we're like 55%, 47, 71, 63, 37, 36. We felt as an administration, it might be difficult to raise fees that much in 1 year, and that it would be a better process to do it over a period of 3 years to get it to the average.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, does administration have enough feedback from council? Yes, okay, thank you. We will then move on to the E4-2, Community and Protective Services, the columbarium status. And it looks like you both are presenting as well.
Okay, I'm just gonna switch PowerPoints here. Just bear with me for a second. I'm having a bit of a, there we go. Oh, I've lost it. My apologies. Just give me 1 second. My sincere apologies. I'm having just a tiny bit of computer problems. If you'll just give me 1 second, hopefully I can resolve it.
1 second.
Okay, how about 10 seconds?
Anybody know the score in the Oilers game?
5-2 for Oilers.
Okay, we can start to see it now.
There we go. My apologies for that. Through the chair to council, this is an update on the issues we were having with the columbariums for council to get a full discussion and update on it. So during the interment to add remains to a columbarium niche, we discovered water penetration in that niche. As a result, there was damage to the contents housed in that niche. Further inspection of the remaining columbarium niches found additional water penetration, mostly isolated to our oldest columbarium that we have. At that point, we did a full assessment of every single columbarium niche that we had, and we determined that we have 15 niches that have confirmed damage. And again, a large majority, 14 of them, I believe, are all in the oldest niche we have. It's hard to really fully assess where and why the damage happened, but definitely improper seals was most likely contributed to it. Maybe the design of the oldest columbarium, and maybe even the planters had something to do with the planter in that columbarium, because it was in there very differently than any of the other ones could have contributed to it. We have attempted to contact and inform each family that we found damage of the cremains in, and give them an update of the status and potential steps moving forward. We were not able to contact all families. Some families, the people on the contact list are also passed away, and we're making every attempt to. And right now, I think we're at 8 or 9 families out of the 15 that we've been able to contact. Those families were very supportive of our restoration plans. And our plan is that we would open and reintern the remains at no cost to the families. The town will engage the funeral home to assist with removing, cleaning, storing, and reinterring the remains. And at this point, our recommended plan of action is to put them back in to the same niche that they came out of. And what we would do is we'd clean those niches. We're going to put small holes in the bottoms. If any other additional moisture occurs, for it can drain out, and do a really good proper reseal of the niche. The recommended repairs would cost us, estimate wise, sealants is pretty cheap, about $1,000. We can remove all the improper planters and get new planter inserts for all the columbariums for about $5,500. Replacing the damaged cremain containers is anywhere from $500 to $1,000 each. So that would cost about $15,000. And then funeral home fees, it will be in the range of about $500 for each niche that they perform those services for us. So that'd be about $7,500. Currently, our cemetery reserve has a balance of $42,500 plus, with an annual contribution of $5,000. It is in the report that we've indicated, though. Next, in this 2020 budget, we have $10,000 set aside for the cemetery survey, site survey and plan. And in 2023, we have currently a 32 niche columbarium scheduled to be purchased at roughly $32,000. So a majority of that reserve is already accounted for already. So that's the update. I'm open for discussion and questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Latour. Does council have any questions? No questions. Okay, Councillor Taylor.
So if I'm reading this right, we basically have two options. Repair it or build a new one. Am I correct? To the chair, to administration?
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor. That would be the correct. We have two options. We can repair those niches, put them back in, which we think is a viable option, or we'd have to re-intern all those cremains into new niches. If we did that, we would fill our current one and we would need another one immediately.
Okay, go ahead.
So through the chair, looking at the recommended repairs, it would be about 29,000. Am I right? Did my math?
Yep.
I'm a drama teacher, so doing math tough, but 29,000 or build a new one for 49,000.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor, that would be roughly correct. We would have to use the current columbarium and fill it up, which would mean we would have no spaces and we would automatically need a new columbarium right away.
Madam Chair, just to add one thing to Mr. Latour's comment, there would still be some of those fees even if we used a new columbarium. So it'd be the new columbarium plus some of those costs, replacing the damaged urns, etc. So that happens even if we use the old facility.
Go ahead, Peter.
Through the chair to administration. So we had this issues with the current columbarium. Do other municipalities have issues with this structure or type of columbarium, or is this magically the only one?
So through the chair to Councillor Taylor, we have our columbariums. This damage was only in that one main one, in one niche and another columbarium. All our other columbarium niches are absolutely fine. we contacted the supplier and had conversations with them. And this is not something that they have seen at all. So that's why it's hard to really peg down what the main cause is, because it was very much isolated to one side of that columbarium also. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I've got a question to administration. So if I'm understanding this correctly, there's certainly not enough money to do the repairs that are recommended here, and then also in a year or two build a new one as well, in addition to the site plan. So how much money are we short?
So through the chair to the chair, if we were to do our current repairs now, that is going to cost us about 29,000. We would be short. If we take that money from the reserve, we would be short that much in the reserve in 2023, close to that amount.
Councillor Schnurr.
Through the chair to Mr. Latour. So we've contacted all the families. No one has an issue right now. So I guess what we have to do is, we know there's a cost of 29,000. We have to do the repairs and move forward. And listening to other recommendations, what I'm hearing, it was only one. So in the future, the other ones that stand up and down seem to be better maintenance, which is true and false, because if we've got, there's 3 out there, or 4, am I correct?
4.
Going by the 4, so there's 4. So virtually out of the 4, only half of one failed. So we don't have, so if half of one failed to one side, so if no one has a problem with it, whether, you know, we are spending money, we need to repair it, move on, learn from our mistake, and then we carry on. There's no use. Even though we don't want to spend the money, we don't have much of a choice. We need to move forward.
So through the chair to Councillor Chenard, my apologies. We have 5 of the 32 niche columbariums, 4 old ones. We purchased a new one last year. It looks the same on the outside, but the niche designs are very different. All the old 4 old ones we have are very, very similar, but it was the oldest one that had the damage in it. We inspected every single niche, and we are going back also and ensuring and double checking that any niche that we don't feel is properly sealed, that we're going to make sure it's properly sealed in all of them. But we are fairly confident that moving forward, the repairs that we will do will meet the needs moving forward.
Gee, thank you.
Mayor Zahara.
Yes, through to administration, I think we need to move forward with this. I also think we need to move forward with the vertical columbarium. We'll have to find the money, pull out of some other reserves to cover it. It's unfortunate that this occurred. I'm just wondering if in our new cemetery bylaw, if we are going to restrict reopening these niches. I find it difficult that those would be reopened. We don't allow people to reopen graves on a regular basis. Because, you know, is there a situation where you're opening and closing these things that they lose some of their seal and moisture might be getting in that way as well?
Through the chair to the mayor, the niches are designed for 2 sets of remains, and that's what we typically sell them for. So we allow them to do that. It's on us to ensure that these are all sealed properly when we reopen them and reseal them again. The current newest niche we have has a very, very different niche system for the door. And then the 72 one would probably be along that design, where we don't actually seal them because it has a very different door to it or cover to it. It's just very different, and I'd have to bring some pictures back to better explain it. But we're putting very stringent SOPs in place to ensure that every niche is properly sealed. If we have to reopen and put a second set of cremains in there, but they're designed for 2 sets of cremains.
Councillor Moore.
Through the chair to Mr. Latour, the damage to these niches, that's probably attributed to environmental, no vandalism in any of these?
Through the chair to Councillor Moore, absolutely no vandalism. This is environmental and very isolated to one side of one columbarium for 14 of them. So it easily could be some kind of design issue also.
Thank
you. Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair to administration, I'll echo what the mayor said. I think we need to follow through the recommended repairs for 29,000, give or take, and then we'll have to find money to move into the reserves in the cemetery to cover future costs of things. It's unfortunate the way it's happened, but I don't think we're left with any choice. I certainly couldn't go with the more expensive item at this time. So long as the repairs work and are long term, that's where I'd like to see us move forward with. So thank you.
I'll just pick up as well. I also agree with what Mayor Zahara said. I think that we need to find the money in the reserves. We certainly can't leave them unattended, and re-entering the niches into the same one after remediation has occurred is, I think, the best thing to do. So if I don't hear any more questions on the floor, does administration have everything that they require? Okay. We will move on. We don't have any, oh, sorry, Mr. Beck.
No.
Oh.
Signaling Mr. Latour, Madam Chair, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thought you were waving me down. So with no information items, we move on to G1, Alberta Municipalities Conference reporting. Did CEO Burbidge want to speak to this at all?
Almost certainly. Throughout the conference that we all attended in November, the opportunity to have, for one, I would just speak to just the opportunity to be in person with the elected officials and administration across our province was an incredible opportunity after 2 years of being away. Most certainly the education sessions that that we attended, myself specifically. The community strategic plan was one of them that most definitely brought a lot of value, as well as the Indigenous relations item that I attended as well. Overall, I think that the general sessions with our, the general sessions allowed for, in the resolutions allowed for that debate in that way that we very much, I would say almost crave in a sense, when, the debate that occurs at that table was welcoming and not always, sometimes it was surprising, I would say. So that's essentially for value for administration to attend, to be able to review, where we were at with some of our key issues was, ultimately is always some of the most benefit that we receive. And the connections again to make those connections during that convention was it was almost reinvigorating, I would have to say. So definitely the value that we brought back for the organization and the community, I think is is some of those different ideas that, such as the, the hydrogen facility, that's something that we don't know a lot about. And so essentially it's just making those relationships to understand more about. So that was essentially from my perspective, that I brought.
Okay, perfect. We'll start with Councillor Sharp.
Sure, start me. I echo what the CEO has said. I was the same way for the first time in 2 years. It was great. My most important thing, like a lot of the learning sessions, I didn't make them to, but the whole idea is this is lobbying, networking. So I, for one, as the Alberta rep for Trans-Canada Highway, where we find great value, a lot of the towns over the past have dropped out. So I spent most of my time lobbying City of Edmonton, Lloydminster, places like that. The resolutions is very important as well, because there is resolutions brought forward that we have an opportunity to vote. The other thing too is a lot of times when we go out and we do studies, here's our opportunity to talk to, let's say, the City of Edmonton mayor or other towns when we're talking about homelessness, mental health. You get to do your own study, question them, go to Lloydminster and say, hey, we have a homeless problem. How are you dealing with it? So that was my main thing, is lobbying, networking. That'd be it for my report.
Okay, thank you. We'll skip Councillor Taylor.
He was there one day.
I went to Moody's. That was different than AMA.
Well, you can give us a report on that, just so we make you feel like a
So
counselor.
Councillor Schnarr, this report is on councillors who attended the Alberta Municipalities Conference held on November 17th to 19th. We'll report on the lessons learned and insights from the event. So,
My mistake, you don't get a report.
so we'll skip Councillor Taylor there. Councillor Pacitti.
Yeah, I think it just echo what I said at the last report we gave at the last meeting, when we gave our committee reports. I, for one, AUMA has always been, and FCM the same. They are a session that is on lobbying, and you're there to elect your officials to represent municipalities to the province and take your resolutions to the province. They add education sessions. I've never gone to a lot of them because personally I've always sat at the back and left, because most of the time there's just somebody reading off a slide to me, and I've never gotten a lot out of them. The sessions were good this year. Not a lot's changed in 4 years. There's still a lot of the show us the money resolutions. And I'll re-echo what I said last meeting. The biggest one to me that I really hope moves forward was the one on policing in regards to a commissions or to a regional commission model, very similar to as what you would say we have with the foundations throughout the province, an area where you have elected officials managing a board with a commissioner or whatever you may call it, that runs and operates the policing regionally as opposed to individually. Therefore, you are similar to Evergreen's Foundation, have a larger tax base to assess your policing needs out of. And I hope that resolution grabs traction. It did get a large percentage of votes. There wasn't that many controversial ones this year. There was only the one that, and it never changes. You always have the same 5 people in the room that will always vote against your resolutions, even when they shouldn't. It should be 100% saying yes, but there'll always be 5 to 12 people in a room of 500 that will do that. So other than that, networking was good. A lot of familiar faces. But again, I think we have a strong board. And I think they'll represent municipalities well. They'll take the voice of municipalities to the province. So I don't have much more detail into that without actually grabbing the resolution books and spending an hour talking about each resolution. But I voted the way I feel that our community thinks, and make sure that our voice was heard.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, it was good to get back after all these years here and that. I did attend one session, which was the hydrogen, which was somewhat informative. I got more out of looking at the news, reading the papers, and doing my own research on it and that. They talked a little bit about the asset management plan they're going through and stuff. But I also found that networking was way more important to me this year, and as other years too. I got a chance to sit down and talk with the mayor of Edmonton, which was really great, as I did other years with Don Iverson was there. Got his perspective. I wish the mayor of Calgary would have been up to, like to talk to her, but she wasn't there. Got to meet a lot of
Okay, thank you. Councilor Moore.
Thank you. Well, I enjoyed my first AUMA conference. I thought it was well run, and the seminars presented contained a wealth of information. I welcome the fact that this was a live event and not virtual. I think most of us can agree there. This gave all councillors and municipal officials a chance to network, which is a valuable opportunity to compare municipal philosophies and strategies. It also gives one a good idea of the problems and possible solutions that we as councillors and mayors all face. I also enjoyed an opportunity to hear Premier Kenny and several of the cabinet ministers, especially the opportunity to question them on various topics affecting not only our town, but the province as a whole. As a new member of council, the Alberta Municipalities Conference, the new name given to AUMA, presented me with a wealth of information and views, which I will keep in mind during the rest of my tenure on council. The conference also illustrated to us as members of council that various municipalities may differ, but our problems and strengths are largely the same. I look forward to the 2022 conference, which will be held in Calgary. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Zahara.
I think probably the highlight of the conference was watching 5440 perform. It's fantastic. A big surprise. I didn't expect that. As was mentioned, great opportunity to network, talk to government officials. I had the opportunity to speak with staff with the Ministry of Social Services, as well as Emily Long about homelessness, and connect with a number of different mayors and councillors from across Alberta, which was interesting because everybody seems to be having the same challenges right now. One of the sessions I attended was the economic developers of Alberta. And they were talking about economic development and the priorities of investors. They've done some studies, and some of the top things that investors are looking at when they're looking at communities, 90% say skilled labor is one of the major drivers as to determining where they go. 90% say that. 89% say labor costs, highway accessibility, 87%, and things such as quality of life, energy availability, fast track permitting, land, and accessibility to airports, major drivers for investment. Now, they also talked about the Experience Alberta app, which is a platform that they have that all communities in Alberta can piggyback on, where they can create their own branded app to promote shop local, as well as local events. So certainly something I think we should explore doing to help promote our local business community. I thought it was a great AUMA. They did so safely. And there was no big spike in COVID cases. So it shows that you can live with COVID and still go about your business. So it was great to see. I think that was the first major event in downtown Edmonton. And being around, I know the business community down there really appreciated seeing people. Yeah, it was a great time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I think I'm the last one now. Mayor Zahara spoke on one of the ones that I found to be one of my favorite ones on the don't waste your energy. Sorry, economic development. So I'll speak on the Don't Waste Your Energy. So I attended a session, this was right before COVID started, on landfills, and the idea of just like, isn't it cheaper just to burn your garbage, right? And that idea sounds really fantastic until you start to look at the numbers. And so in Southern Alberta, they're doing a Southern Alberta Energy Waste Association through one of their RETAs. So they're trying to essentially burn all the non-recyclable waste from the landfills. And I think there was about 20 municipalities involved, or maybe more. And it was pretty interesting with what they've done there. The only way to make this feasible is to increase our tipping fees. That's right off the ground. This is not a cheap proposition at all, but fascinating nonetheless. And if they end up getting some government grants that they're looking for, they would have to charge $50 a ton per municipality to make this work. If they don't get any type of funding, then it would be up to $90 per ton, which would include debt financing. And they've found that you can, trucks are cheaper to haul the waste if it's under 250 kilometers, and railway is cheaper for anything beyond $250. 250 kilometers. So it was a really interesting conversation that they're having, and knowing that our landfill doesn't have unlimited years left in it, that it seems to be decreasing quite significantly every time we get an update. This is something that I would hope that, when we are having regional meetings or speaking to other mayors, that we can just start having this conversation. It could take 10 years to do something like this, in a regional environment, or at least talking about it at our regional waste management, and just seeing what kind of appetite there is for that. It's certainly a little ways out, but I think those conversations have to start sooner than later, and see what the appetite is. I also thought I went to a session on the hydrogen developments that they're looking at for municipalities, and I honestly didn't know much about it. I heard a few things that the premier had mentioned on the news and read a couple news articles about it. Still didn't understand the thing, so I went to the session. So it was really nice that they offered that, and they're saying by 2050, 30% of energy forecasted should be produced from hydrogen, which was a bit jaw-dropping for me. And so the thing with the hydrogen is the supply is not the problem at all. In Alberta, especially where we're located, hydrogen would be derived from natural gas, which we currently have plentiful of. And so the problem is the demand, and that distributions are the primary challenges. So they're trying to create ways to expand the network of hydrogen, but first they have to have the demand before they can kind of go there. And the transportation sector, so vehicle driving, is kind of low-hanging fruit for hydrogen development, and the most market-ready sector. So I was able to talk to some of the ATCO employees that were there at one of the evening sessions, and they were mentioning that eventually they would be able to add hydrogen into a natural gas to a smaller percentage, and then without having to replace any major things on our natural gas supply lines to our homes, to do it that way. But they do need to have the access to the hydrogen located nearby. So that's also another thing that that could happen. And so I following the session, I didn't quite understand how do municipalities do this. So so I asked the presenter, I said, what can we do? If there was something right now, like what can we do? And he says, if there's a partner in your community, like in Edson, we are located next to a coal mine. If the coal mine was interested in using that to supply their trucks, then partnering with them, or developing or getting a partner with the private sector to supply it for municipal vehicles or something, by having a few different businesses or people that are interested in creating that demand in mind would be the best way for that to go. So if there are any businesses in mind, it might be something to bring up at the Synergy meetings or at the chamber to just kind of see if there's any appetite for changes in that. So I thought it was a fabulous information session, and definitely opened my eyes to some things coming down the pipe in the next few years. So that's my presentation. If we go back to
I have if I may.
Oh, yes, Councilor Sushi.
I didn't go to the waste one. When they were talking about the difference between the 250 kilometers, did they use the value, or did they reference anywhere from all the trash from BC, from the Lower Mainland being trucked into Alberta? did they make comparisons to that or even talk about that at all in that session?
I don't recall that one. This was, I believe, basically right, almost, the map looked like all of southern Alberta.
Okay.
So I don't know if they had any other outside municipalities outside of Alberta involved with that.
I just said that private haulers are hauling the trash
Yeah,
and they're not using rail. So I was just curious if they were using comparisons because you see those trucks roll through town every other day.
Sure.
I think it's Riley. Is that where the big commercial landfill is?
yeah. I was also wondering, during the session if the rail capacity in southern Alberta is different than it is elsewhere too, right? So that might have an impact on each area, but it certainly does pose, at least an idea of, how that happens, because it seems so great, when you talk about landfill issues, people say, oh, why don't we just like build an incinerator and burn it? And I mean, it sounds great, but the math is that you need about $90 tipping fees in order to make that feasible. So, and that's with the support of 20 municipalities. So that's just not one municipality. You have to have a consistent supply of worthy garbage, worthy waste. So it has to be non-recyclable. So there's some parameters to it. You just can't burn anything. But interesting nonetheless, and informative. So does anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay, so we will move on. We don't have any sundry items. Do we have any questions from the media and public regarding items from this committee of the whole meeting? Steve, do we have anyone on the line?
Madam Chair, we do not have any questions today.
Okay, all right. Merry Christmas, Adrian. And okay, we will move.
Will we go into a closed meeting session?
Yes, I was just going to move to, we will be going into a closed meeting session, J1. So I need a motion that the meeting move to a closed session pursuant to section 197 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters protected from disclosure by section 24(1)(c) of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act. Councilor Pastichny will move that. All in favor?
What was that first part?
Okay. So I just need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Councilor Taylor makes that motion. All in favor?
Opposed.
Motion carried.